Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Claire and today I'm going to be taking part in the mid-year book Freakout tag. I thought that this would be a really fun way for you guys to get to know about me and my reading taste, and on top of that I always really love this tag when other YouTubers do it, as it's a really great way to reflect on the last 6 months and look forward to the next 6 months. So far this year I have read 68 books. In part thanks to lockdown, because I have been reading so much more over the last few months. Basically since, reading has now replaced all my hobbies because I can't go and see friends or do anything like that. So I've just been reading a lot. And so far I've been reading probably 4 or 5 books every week. So without further ado, let's get into the tag. So the first question is the best book that you've read so far in 2020. So I've got a few for this one. So the first one is Fallible Justice by Laura Laxo, and I read this a couple of months ago, and this is a urban fantasy mixed in with like paranormal investigation. Second one is After Darkness by J.F. Johns, and this is a dystopian world where humans and cyborgs aren't allowed to talk to each other, and there's a curfew, and basically the two main characters are a human and a cyborg who end up falling in love. And it's the first of 2 books, and I plan to read the second one soon because I really enjoyed it. The next one is, it's kind of a series of books, so it's the 6 Stories series, and this is based around a fictional podcast that investigates murders that have slightly paranormal elements to them. And this series is by Matt Wazowski. I hope I've said that right. And I just really enjoyed them. There's 4 series so far, and each chapter is supposed to be another episode of the podcast. And basically all the characters were so well written and the whole thing was so well crafted that I completely forgot that these were supposed to be fictional podcasts. It felt so realistic. So the next one I would say is When Stars Are Bright by Amber R. Duell, which is meant to be a Thumbelina retelling, but it's kind of quite a loose retelling, and it's a young adult urban fantasy set in 1930, and I just thought it was really well written and I loved all the characters. And finally I'd go with Aurora Rising, which I talked about in my last video that I read quite recently. And again, as I said in my previous video, I really loved the characters, I loved the storyline, and it was just like it was a lot of fun. So the second question is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2020. So this series also could go under best books that I've read this year. The one I would have chosen is Dead Woman Scorned and Anger is an Acid by Michael Clarke. So the first one in the series is a trilogy, and the first one in the series is The Patience of a Dead Man. And basically the story follows Tim Russell, and it's set in the 1970s. And Tim and his wife have recently gotten divorced, and so with the money he has from the divorce, he decides to buy a farmhouse and some land, and just to try and buy a house that needs doing up as he works in construction. Unfortunately, when he buys the house and moves in, he starts to see this woman and some weird goings on around the house, and so he calls the estate agent and asks for her to come and check it out, and it turns out, they find out that the house is haunted, and the whole series is about investigating who the people are that are haunting the house and the estate, and also just trying to help them get some rest and some peace. So I thought they were really good books. They were really creepy, really scary, and just really good ghost stories, if you like that kind of thing. The third question is a new release that you haven't read yet, but you want to. So I have a lot of books that I need to read. As you can tell from my shelves behind, I have a lot of books. I think the last time we counted, we had about 2,000 books. So I don't often buy brand new books, but I have been the last few months with lockdown. So just a few of the books that have come out recently that I would like to read are A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown, The Court of Miracles by Kester Grant, The Lucky Ones by Liz Lawson that came out earlier this year, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, and Agnes at the End of the World by Kelly Williams. Next question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So A Girl Made of Air by Nydia Hetherington. I've been really lucky this week to get an ARC through NetGalley for that one, so I'm really, really excited to read that one. Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, and Perence by Susanna Clarke, who is the author who wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which I would say is probably my favourite book of all time. So question 5 is your biggest disappointment. And so for this one I would say Paperback Crush, which was by Gabrielle Moss. And it was a huge disappointment. I read this earlier this year, and obviously, and the book is supposed to be about all the stories that I used to really love as a teenager. So things like all the books that came out in the 90s, like The Babysitter's Club and The Saddle Club, and Sweet Valley High, and all of those kind of trashy fiction that was designed for young girls. And I thought it was going to be like a celebration of those books and how much they impacted my life and other people's lives and culture at the time, and all that kind of thing. But actually it felt like Gabrielle, despite claiming that she's a fan, she actually is quite derisive about these stories, and it just felt like she was making fun and was quite and she also didn't really go into much detail about them. So she would talk about, each chapter is a separate sort of theme, and then she would talk about the books, but there was no real sort of analysis or anything. There wasn't even a conclusion chapter. The book just suddenly ended and it felt quite abrupt. So the next question is biggest surprise. And for this I chose The Rosie Project, which is by Graham Simsian. I think I've said that right. And basically this one is a story about Don. At first when I read this book, I started off and I just didn't like him as a main character, and it's from his point of view. I didn't like him. I thought he was too rigid, he was mean, he was rude, but actually because I read it for a book club, I felt like I had to persevere. And as the story went on, I felt like actually I really started to enjoy it and found quite a lot of humour in there. I think it helped as well that I also really liked Rosie herself, and I thought she was a really great character. And yeah, just the whole story I actually really enjoyed, so that was a big surprise for me. The next question is your favourite new author, which is either a debut author or new to you. So normally I would say that I consider my favourite authors to be ones where if they brought out a new book, I would buy it straight away, no questions asked, doesn't matter what it's about, I'll buy it, because I love them and their writing so much. So for this one I would say first of all Michael Clarke, who wrote The Patience of a Dead Man. So I love that series so much, and it was so creepy and just absolutely bone-chilling. Like I didn't want to go to bed because I was trying to read it and find out what happened next. So for me, I would say he is definitely now one of my favourite authors. Like I would definitely buy that. Matt, who wrote the 6 Stories series as well. Again, I was so gripped. I read all 4 books in 2 days and I just couldn't put them down. So again, if he brings out any other books and future books in the 6 Stories series especially, I definitely buy them without question. Pre-order them straight away. Question number 8 is your newest fictional crush. So yeah, wouldn't say I had any fictional crushes this year. There is one character in books. I'm not normally someone who gets crushes on fictional characters or book characters. There is one character in books who I would say counts as a fictional crush, and that's Logan Ninefingers from Joe Abercrombie's books, because I just love him. The next question is your newest favourite character. So I read 2 books from a newish author, which were A Thoughtful Woman and An Implacable Woman, and they're quite sort of thriller mystery stories, and I really, really loved the main character in that, which is Sally Mellors. She's really smart, she's really intelligent, she's very free thinking, and she's also a serial killer, but if you ignore that part, she's a really great person. I also really liked Bridget Sharp. She is from The Tempest Project, which is by Anthony Johnson. And again, I read this as part of a book tour, and I absolutely loved Bridget. I thought she was a great character. She is a hacker for MI5. She's a goth, which I could relate to. She obviously is really techie and really nerdy, which I really loved. And she's also incredibly smart. So I thought she was a great character. And in that book, she has a lot of wibbles about the fact that she's soon turning 30, and she feels like, isn't she now too old to be dressing in a sort of alternative way, and does she really want to be the old goth girl in the corner of the club? And again, I just felt like she was a character that I could really relate to, because I sort of felt similar when I turned 30, and yeah, I just thought she was a really well written character. And I did actually connect with Anthony on Twitter, the author, and he said that she was also inspired, and that part was inspired by his own experiences. So yeah, I thought she was a really great character, really well written and really interesting. The next question is a book that made you cry. So I cry a lot at books. I cry a lot at life in general. So either that's happy tears or sad tears or whatever. I'm a very emotional person. And so a lot of books make me cry. Normally they just have to mention dogs and tears. So the most recent ones would be when I read The Beauty of Broken Things by Victoria Connolly last week, and that follows a story of Helen, who's passed away in a train accident, and then it follows her widowed husband Luke as he finds Helen's friend Orla, who Helen knew online. And there are a lot of scenes in there, obviously, that are going to be quite emotional, with it being about someone who's died. But I especially found it really, really sad, because the two of them had been talking about getting a dog one day, and Helen was really keen to get a Labrador, and there's a scene where Luke is going through Helen's handbag that the police gave him afterwards, and he finds her keys, and they've got a Labrador key ring, and he gets all really upset because he remembers about how she was so desperate for a dog, and he feels guilty because he should have got her, why didn't he just get her the dog that she really wanted? And I don't know, there was just something about that scene that just really got me, especially as someone who myself would really love a dog, especially a Labrador. So I found that really emotional, and I cried buckets. So the next one is a book that made you happy, which I guess is a interesting contradiction. So for this one, I would choose Aurora Rising. So I talked about this again in my last video, because this is still quite fresh in my mind, but it took me quite a long time to read it, like a few weeks, because for one, I wanted to wait for the sequel to arrive from Illumicrate, which unfortunately still hasn't arrived. But I had to in the end, I just had to finish it because I was enjoying it so much. And it does have some emotional parts to it, like that were quite upsetting. I'm not going to give anything away, but there were some quite emotional scenes in there. But it just made me really happy. It made me feel really sort of warm and fuzzy, and it was just such a lovely, fun story. And it has a heist, which is always fun. And yeah, it just made me really happy. It was just a really great book. So I really, fingers crossed, Illumicrate get the sequel to me soon, because I just can't wait to read that. So the next question is the most beautiful book that you've bought this year, or you've received. So I'm just going to go by books that have come out so far this year, because I do buy a lot of special edition of books and pretty books, and I'm all about sprayed edges. So there's two that I've chosen. So the first one is The Court of Miracles by Kester Graham, and this is the limited edition that came from Waterstones. It has my favourite, those blue sprayed edges, which, as I said, anything with sprayed edges is pretty much a book that I will buy. I don't even care what it's about, I'll buy it for the edges. And what makes it especially, has made it a favourite, is underneath the dust jacket, it has this really gorgeous foiled cover. I think it's just absolutely stunning, and I did partly buy it because of how good it looked. The second book that I've chosen is Agnes at the End of the World, and this is by Kelly McWilliams. And so this book, I basically, as I say, I just bought it partly just because of the cover, because I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. I had to get it in hardback, which I imported all the way from America Special, because yeah, I just think that's really, really stunning, really lovely picture. The next question is, the final question, is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? All of the books. I find it really hard to choose. So I've got loads of books on my TBR, I've got loads of books on my NetGalley that I need to read, like ARCs that I've been given. I've got books that I've been given by the authors to review as well that I need to read. So it's going to be a busy year. Obviously as well, I have also mentioned earlier some releases that I'm really excited for and can't wait to read later this year. The other thing is that I also realised, especially when I was clearing through all of my shelves behind me and sort of tidying them ready to do videos, was that actually I have always tried to read a lot of female authors, and I've also really tried to read debut authors, and in the past sort of year or two as well, I've really tried to read outside of my comfort zone. So my usual go-to is fantasy or dystopian novels, but the past year or so I've really tried to read different kind of stuff, which is great. But one thing that I did actually realise when going through my shelves is that even though I read a lot of female authors, almost every author is white. And obviously as well with the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's really made me rethink about myself and my own prejudices and my own presumptions, and it just really made me realise, especially there have been a few hashtags going around the book community on Twitter as well about finding out what white authors have been paid compared to black authors, and again it just sort of made me realise that I should read more diverse books. You know, there's not very many books that I've read that have had disabled characters, for example. I've read a few that have had gay and lesbian characters, for example, but can't remember any trans characters, for example. So as well as trying to read, just generally trying to read more diverse books. That doesn't mean that I don't think that white authors who are, cis white men don't have anything valuable to add. They're still some of my favourite authors, like Joe Abercrombie, for example. But I just feel like, I can do better, and that I was disappointed as well with myself that I didn't realise this until quite recently when, it had already been talked about. So, so I'm looking forward to, I'm really looking forward to reviewing more diverse books, and I will also try and tag those as well and flag them when they're diverse as well, because I think it's just something that's really important and matters quite a lot to me. So that's all the questions. Thank you so much for watching if you got to the end. Do leave a comment down below with what books, your thoughts on the books that I've chosen, whether you agree or disagree. And I'd also love to hear your book recommendations, especially, as I said, for more diverse fiction. And I hope you will join me for my next video. Bye for now.